Pat, I don't think there's a topic that you and I grok about that gets more attention in the press, the media, in the technology circles, and on X than when we're ripping on Intel. Let's talk about what's going on there. I mean, gosh, it feels like they're getting their shit together, but now we're hearing, I mean, the foundry's about to get spun off, and you're getting calls to get rid of their chairman. They want you to single-handedly make that happen somehow, and Intel is going to be, what, a division of Broadcom pretty soon? I mean, is there any merit to this stuff?
Yeah, so Dan, if you remember, about 6 months ago, there were a flurry of, maybe it was 3 months ago, a flurry of rumors, and you and I were weighing in, and then they just kept coming, but so many of them were nonsense, right? So I just stopped reacting, and then I felt that I had to get pulled in because of a lot of articles that came out, you know, Bloomberg, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, right? All of these, and here's the latest, and I'll start kind of chronologically, that TSMC was going to buy 51%. Well, Frank Yeary, board of directors head for Intel, is just the story, what was written. He's been shopping with the administration for TSMC to buy 51% of Intel's fab business, and then there was another one floating out there that, okay, well, Broadcom would buy it, and I saw, you know, two rumors: they're going to buy the whole thing, and then they're just going to buy the product version of it, otherwise called Intel Design. So, you know, I was getting a bunch of calls, invited on shows to kind of discuss that. And, you know, essentially I just stick to my guns, which is any TSMC buying 51% of anything Intel is just complete and absolute nonsense. And it gets back to a couple facts, and, you know, dispute it with me on X if you'd like, but you can't just buy a foundry. It's not just a factory with tools and people, right? There are two main assets. Maybe we can argue there's three, which are the property, plant, and equipment, and then the transistor intellectual property, okay? Giving a foreign company 51% ownership of the transistor IP is just not going to happen. It goes against everything that the current administration and the previous one and the one before that stuck to. So, and you know, I've probably got 5 or 6 models going in my mind. And then it was funny. A couple hours after one of these stories came out, the administration finally went out there and said, okay, we're not interested in, said Trump may not support foreign firm operating Intel's U.S. factories. White House official says. Knew this with that hilarious Bloomberg article, and I'm glad the administration set that out there. So, and then, you know, there was an article out of the New York Times that I contributed to, where they asked me, well, okay, if TSMC buys Foundry and Qualcomm buys Design, but that's another one. I can't believe we even forgot about that one. That was in the Qualcomm article. What would that make Intel? And it's pretty clear, if both of its parts get sold off, it ceases to exist. But I think a lot of that is nonsense. Like I said, I do think a scenario that could work would be a minority investment, because here's the deal. TSMC is looking at 50 to 100% tariffs on there, and I think that is the level that would get the NVIDIAs, the Qualcomms, and anybody else who goes through TSMC would get their attention. So TSMC is eyeing the ways that we can make that go away. And the other thing is positional power. Intel 18A, right? I've been saying for a long time, and I think you have too, that hey, performance at this juncture of the process, performance looks good, power looks good, and this is for big die, using high performance transistors. As opposed to like mobile low leakage ones, it looks very good. And then, boom! I think yesterday at a forum, Intel disclosed that even their SRAM from a die area perspective was actually the same as TSMC2. Okay, and that was one of the criticisms that we had before was the SRAM size. So Intel has a lot of power. 18A is real. I will caveat that I until I see tens of millions of 18A parts coming out from Intel, which by the way, 18A is a year ahead or so of TSMC 2. There's still stuff that could go wrong.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff in there, Pat. People aren't really talking about this, but since the late 1980s, TSMC had over $100 billion of government investment made. Now, again, that's over 3 decades. This is not over a short period of time. And I think the amount of investment that would need to be to make Intel at parity would probably fall into a similar number, especially if they want to accelerate that. Now, Trump is all about American exceptionalism. And American exceptionalism means that he does not want to be the president of the United States at the time in which the United States lost its technological leadership, because it basically lost the ability to produce leading edge silicon here in the US by US companies. And so TSMC is a bit of this middle ground. TSMC is a partner. TSMC is a friendly to the US, to US fabless designers. And in fact, a lot of Intel's woes are because TSMC has been so good to US fabless designers that none of them want to use Intel's foundries. On the other hand, hey, John Fort, on the other hand, TSMC is not an American company. TSMC is in a country that is still debatably part of the China empire. Now, again, they see themselves as sovereign, but China doesn't see it that way. China is a powerful nation building up its military. It's shown with, again, DeepSeek is debatable exactly how it was done, but it's shown what I would call a relentless pursuit and wherewithal to figure out ways to get what it needs to get to a parity and get to competitive level it needs to get to make sure that they don't lose the future on an AI being held back by policy. So having said all that, I tweeted something last night and it was really pretty basic. And it was that Intel would be idiotic to sell right now. I know it's crazy, but like Intel's worst was like 3 years ago. I know nobody saw that because it actually takes time for a company that big.
Dude, we all saw it. And, I got put in, we both got put in the Apple. But dude, I called the AMD thing early on.
The numbers didn't show though, because it took some time for the P&Ls to follow.
That's chips, man. You know that.
Yeah. But
dude, if you screw up architecture, it'll take you minimum 4 years. You screw up transistor process and fab economics, could be a freaking decade.
Yeah, no, I get it. But so
I'm just saying,
you and I both know from the work we do, right? Technological insights have a value of N, and investor insights have a value of N times X times some exponential square. People just care more. And so the numbers have been so bad. This company's been trading at close to book value. I mean, at a literal deficit to book value for some period of time. And basically over this period of time, the last couple of years, and by the way, with TSMC, the company actually dug itself out of a bit of a hole on client. It got itself to a period of time where it could build a competitive part, protect its market share, and keep itself from basically flagellating underneath the weight of all that was being done by Qualcomm, AMD, ARM, and others, to where I'm not saying they've regained share, but they certainly have kind of ceased to shed further share. Yeah. And by the way, we did a huge report on AI PCs, a feature, and we actually talked to 850 ITDMs. Intel's still the highest priority preference part for AI PC. A lot of that's legacy. Intel still sits with almost 60% of preference right now. And so anyways, Foundry, so let me just kind of, because we could spend most of the show on this topic. Broadcom is not going to buy Intel products. I'm just putting out there, I do not believe that rumor. first of all, Hawk could do it. Hawk could go in there and actually cut the weight and shed it. I just don't see that he needs it. I really don't see that he needs it. Unless this is some sort of forced marriage and makeup play that Trump does because of the Qualcomm history, that he does a favor to Broadcom and sort of wants to prop up Intel. But the Intel products business separated from the foundry is actually a good business on paper. So if you actually cut that out and took it out public, it creates a lot of adjusted EBITDA, and it would have good EPS. The foundry is another story, but the foundry, in my opinion, to maintain American exceptionalism requires that $100 billion of investment by the U.S. to make sure that in no way does the U.S. fall behind. Now, that means the U.S. is going to be subsidizing it. That means the U.S. is going to have a say in it. And that means, but I actually think to some extent the U.S. needs to reapply the play that we made to help Taiwan, because the U.S. made Taiwan. Let's be very clear that Taiwan invested $100 billion, but we sent all our best designs and our best companies to Taiwan to manufacture their chips. We could easily implement policy to turn that around through tariffs and through incentives to basically bring that back and say, you make your chips here in the US, and 18A is a good process. We don't know, like you said, we don't know everything. We haven't seen volume, we haven't seen scale, but all the early readouts suggest that Intel and TSMC could be much closer to parity over the next year or two than they've been in a long, long time. And if the U.S. wants to lead the world in AI, they need to lead the world in foundry. That's my take. That's why I think it'd be idiotic to sell. That's why I don't understand what Frank is doing here. But I do understand that in some ways, returning value to shareholder in the near term doesn't always make sense over what is best for long-term economics.